Hey, what's up guys? It's Nick here. Now, did you ever think that Mike Tyson would have such wisdom and something that we could apply to psychology? Well, this clip from Mediocre Tutorials and Reviews channel, one of my favorite channels to follow, shows just that. He briefly talks about how survival and interpersonal relationships between men and women interact, and then Mediocre Tutorials also goes into how that also applies to the modern dating landscape. Now, some interesting points to look at, and I'm gonna break it down as I always do so we can see how it makes sense through science and psychology. Let's get it.
You know why? Because her survival, even though she does everything she does for you. Listen, everything she does for you is for her survival.
Yep.
Everything your mother do for you is for your survival. Now,
Come
listen,
on, Mike.
That's great.
Yo, who would have thought Mike Tyson would have came in with the crazy bars like that? Too many modern men today believe the Disney fairy tale or the narrative of falling in love. Women think about their own survival when it comes to dealing with you. And truthfully, it may be unbeknownst to them, but this comes from an evolutionary perspective. Why do you guys think that the highest thing that women say that they look for is security? Her providing love for you doesn't help her feel more secure, or it doesn't help her survive longer, unless like there's some provisioning that comes with that. But understand this, women love children the way that men love women. So don't opt for a woman to love you, opt for a woman to respect you. The love part, that's just icing on the cake.
Wow, so much was said in such few words. Now, the premise is that your survival being predicated on a woman, whether it be your mother or your romantic partner. Now, he said that your mom cares about your survival and the woman that you're involved with cares about her survival. Now, this is not to take away from either or, because obviously a relationship has roles, it has parts. But if you really look at it in the grander scheme of things, evolutionary psychology can actually break this down. Now, when you think about it, what is our purpose on Earth? Now, we're not going to get into the philosophical aspect of this question just yet, but if you think it from a biological standpoint, we need to procreate. We want our genes to live on. That's what are called genes. This is our biological markers that are within us. We pass them down from generation and they pass down to the next generation and so forth. These are our ancestors, and the ones after us are our descendants. Now, this is a biological process that every species on Earth goes through. It's not just humans, it's not just mammals. Now, obviously there's different ways to do this depending on your species, but the main goal is to get your genes to survive what they call fitness to go to the next generation. Now, as humans though, we've evolved in different ways to keep this going. Now, in ancient times, it made sense that we wanted to procreate with the male or the woman that could give us the most likeliness to give us a child. And once said child is born, that child could live on. Now, to do this, a lot of things had to be in place. Now, nowadays we have some modern conveniences that selection process has been skewed just a little bit. Now, when we go back to why your mom may be more invested in your survival, and that's why she helps you do whatever you need to do, while your romantic partner woman, she might be more concerned with her survival to help you keep doing what you're doing, is because think about the DNA breakdown. It really comes down to why we need to keep this going. Now, I'm gonna use something called the trolley problem to explain this. Now, the typical trolley problem is a moral conundrum that people ask to see how you would choose in a very difficult situation. So imagine a trolley coming down the road. Now, the track split between you. On one side, there's 5 people tied to the track, and that's where the trolley is currently headed. And on the other side, there's 1 person tied to the track. Now, there's a lever there that can switch it to the 1 person's side. Now, you're left with pretty much 2 options. You do nothing and not get involved in this and let the trolley take its course, and then 5 people will get ran over and killed. Or you pull the lever and it goes to the 1 person track and you have less loss of life. Now, people can get into a debate of which one's the right choice based on, oh, that's 5 people dying versus 1, or why you shouldn't do anything because it's not your problem. But if we were to change the stakes a little bit and said, you know who that singular person is. Let's just say it's someone in your life that you know. Are you more likely to leave it alone so it won't hit that person because you know them and those are 5 strangers? Or if I add, it's someone you know, but they're older, over the age of 70, and the 5 strangers are all under the age of 30. Do you say they live longer? But we're still not quite getting to my point yet. Let's say that the 1 person is related to you. Now, this brings us back to that biological aspect, because if they're related to you, depending on what level of relations, they carry some of the same genes that you have. Now, when we think about that survival or passing on our genes, this matters now. So do you leave it alone and let that person related to you live so your genes have a better chance to go? Or do you still try to save the more people? Now, if we go even deeper, let's say all 6 people are related to you, but it's going to depend on who those 6 people are. Let's say that person is a cousin. While they have genes that you share, it's only about 25%. Now, let's say the other 5 are mother, father, brothers, and sisters. They all share 50% of your DNA, meaning depending on their age and reproductive likeliness, they have the best chance of your genes living on, because not only do they have more genes, if they're still at reproductive age, you have the best chance for them to live. Now, you can even separate it even more, saying the one person on the other side is your youngest sibling, and everyone on the other side are the older siblings and mother and father. That youngest sibling now has the most chance for survival of your genes. But this is more mathematical and biological equations thinking about it. And we're not just logical beings. There's emotion involved in this too. But when you think about what Mike said about how survival is predicated on what the benefit for the woman helping you so she can survive versus your mother helping you so you can survive. Because your mother, no matter what you go through, she shares 50% of your DNA. With the woman you're involved with, if you have a child, she's going to protect them. They share 50% of DNA. So where do you fall into this? You share 0% DNA with that woman. That's the whole point. You have to procreate with someone that's not related to you. Now that baby or that child shares 50% of DNA with you and her. But what makes most sense for you to survive? If you keep you alive so that baby and her can keep going, that's the best chance of your genes getting passed on versus helping you out specifically for you and they can diminish, then it won't help your genes go. So that's just a general biological and evolutionary psychological way of looking at it. Now, when Mediocre Tutorials chimed in, he talked about things such as different mating strategies, love, providing resources. Once again, in ancient times, you never knew where your next meal was coming. You didn't know if another neighboring tribe would come and murder you and your people, or you would just get taken by the elements, whether it be an animal or the weather, what may it be, because nowadays we live in much luxury compared to those times, but it's very easy to accommodate yourself through what we have. But this wasn't so simple long time ago. So when he says this, we got to think about what it really costs. Calories weren't abundant about 100 years ago, let alone thousands of years ago. And you're thinking, what do calories factor into this? Well, calories is a measure of energy. We use this to measure how much energy is in our food. We talk about carbs, fats, proteins. There's about 9 calories per 1 gram of fat and 4 calories per 1 gram of carbs and protein. Now, where this comes in is if we don't have enough energy or from our food to be broken down to keep us going, we can't really expend it doing much else. And in those ancient times, we had to hunt. We had to try to find food. Now we don't have to do that as much. So when we're making these decisions, we evolve to have to predicate who we choose as a male who can keep our legacy going, provide our children, be able to nurture them and allow them to grow to a reproductive age so our genes could get going. And the women had to choose a man they knew could make sure the tribe didn't get killed, make sure my child was protected in a dangerous situation, provide food, be able to hunt. Because if you went out for a hunt and didn't bring back anything, it was in vain. And guess what? That happening too much didn't make you the best option, and someone else who can provide, and this did happen, could take over, and this wasn't good because now you're left and you're excommunicated, kind of how lions do. But this is getting kind of off topic. When we bring it back to the whole thing about how love comes into factor, it's not a bad thing. I would never denounce it because love is an emotion that makes us feel good. But like most things, love can be a fleeting emotion. Now, I've talked about this a few times in some of my past videos with Dr. Tai Tashiro, who's an expert in the psychology of romantic relationships. And he talks about this in his books all the time, how love is a fairly new concept. We used to marry for resources. We used to marry for survival. As I mentioned, calories, the more kids you have, the more likely you can provide help to grow food or tame animals or whatever it may be. And you would expend less energy because you had basically a team, and then you had a better chance to keep going. So up until the late 1800s, love was more so a secondary choice. And now we can kind of lead with it because almost all of our basic physiological needs are met and most of our safety needs are met. So we have time to think about, do I like their eyes or do they make me feel good when they hold me at night? These things really aren't as practical, but we have the time and the ability to do it. So all in all, going back to this clip, Mike really made a good point. Our survival is the main idea of what we need to do to live. But this is predicated on how we interact because humans are very social creatures. But your mom being more invested in your survival comes down to the innate biological nature of she needs her genes to go, and that's in you, 50%. And the woman, like Mediocre Tutorials said, they want to take care of the kid. And this is good because she needs to make sure that child reaches reproductive age because they share 50% of her DNA. But you being the odd man out, you don't have any of her DNA. So biologically, it doesn't make sense when it comes to sacrifice one or the other to keep you going if it means choosing. But all in all, this is just a crude description of evolutionary psychology through the words of Mike Tyson and mediocre tutorials and reviews. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to his videos and channel because he has some great content here. So thanks once again for letting me break it down. And as always, get your mind right.